She purchased a man's coffee in queue, unaware that he was a concealed millionaire evaluating genuine charity. The bell above the door chimed as Claire entered the cafe. Her boots were soaking onto the deteriorated tile floor. The aroma of espresso and warm pastries enveloped her like a lullaby, both familiar and soothing, yet elusive. The rain fell incessantly in frigid sheets, drumming against the windows like restless fingers. She cinched her coat closer around her. It was an antiquated coat, 2 sizes oversized with the lining frayed at the cuffs, yet it belonged to her. She positioned herself at the end of the queue, grasping the final $5 she possessed, sufficient for a modest coffee, inadequate for rent, insufficient for the morrow, yet adequate for the present moment. The cafe was unpretentious, exuding aromas of cinnamon and fatigue. The queue was sluggish. Her abdomen growled. A man who appeared out of place stood before her. His gray cloak draped listlessly on his towering, drenched body. His shoes were scuffed, and his stance was slumped as if he bore more than the burden of the rain. She observed his hands trembling slightly as he accessed his wallet. The young clerk, chewing gum, appeared unimpressed. "The total is $4.65, she stated monotonously. The man gazed at his open wallet. "I believed I have a greater quantity." He clumsily extracted coins. "I may have dropped a bill. I was certain." An unpleasant pause ensued, one that extended beyond the confines of time. A woman behind Claire said, "Certain individuals merely squander everyone's time." Claire gazed at him. His shoulders drooped in humiliation. His speech possessed a little roughness, indicative of an individual unaccustomed to soliciting assistance. The cashier exhaled audibly. "Do you possess a card, sir?" "I must have left it at home," he stated quietly. Claire failed to contemplate. She failed to assess the potential future expense of that coffee. She did not evaluate her alternatives. Her voice ascended, distinct and assured. "It is acceptable. I will cover the cost of his coffee." The queue became silent. The cashier fluttered her eyelids. "What do you mean?" Claire advanced, extracting her wrinkled banknote. "I stated, I will cover the cost. Merely the coffee." The man gradually turned to confront her, his dark, weary eyes meeting hers with an expression she could not really identify. Certainly a surprise, but also something akin to wonder. "There is no need for that," he remarked. "I am aware," Claire responded. She presented the invoice. The cashier processed the transaction. There was no applause. No one expressed gratitude to her. As someone positioned behind her, the man, irritated by the delay, received the paper cup with a subdued, "Thank you," directed at the barista. He gazed at Claire once more, this time with greater intensity. "Thank you," he articulated again, but with a measured, deliberate tone. "That signifies more than you realize." She responded with a slight shrug. "It's merely coffee." He smiled, but it was not a mere smile. It was one imbued with experience. He then nodded once and proceeded towards the exit. The door chimed once more as he departed, disappearing into the gray. Claire ordered nothing for herself, as she had no remaining funds, yet she did not feel empty. Inexplicably, she felt fulfilled. She seated herself at a corner table, warming her hands on her coat sleeve. The rain outside persisted, softly tapping against the glass like an incomprehensible whisper. Claire's apartment emitted a faint aroma of cinnamon and damp plasterboard, reminiscent of a once warm, cozy, and inhabited space, now diminished by the passage of time and neglect. A location that groaned underfoot, exhaled upon seating, and retained odors longer than aspirations. It was a compact area, merely a single room situated above an antiquated laundromat where the machines operated late into the night. The radiator in the corner clattered, as if attempting to rouse itself. Furthermore, the window above the sink never fully closed, allowing a chilly draft to seep through the fissured paint. The wallpaper had detached, as if attempting to escape, but was dissuaded. The ceiling displayed a stain from an unreported leak. Nonetheless, it was home. At least it had been. The eviction notice remained skewed on the doorframe, fluttering with each breeze that entered through the gap. Claire had perused it twice. Initially in disbelief, and subsequently to confirm that the date had not altered, Claire contemplated the possibility of 3 or 4 days, contingent upon the landlord's potential oversight or leniency. However, she was acutely aware that expecting compassion was futile, as the world had recently been miserly with benevolence. She let her canvas tote fall to the floor, where it sagged like a weary companion. Her shoes fell away with 2 muted thuds, and the linoleum floor transmitted a chill through the threadbare socks she had worn for several consecutive days. She had not consumed any food since noon. There was little sustenance available, merely a bag of rice and a can of soup she was reserving for a colder evening. She had not purchased groceries in a week, following her dismissal from the diner. The manager cited budget reductions and diminished sales due to highway construction. "It's nothing personal, Claire," he stated, yet always felt personal when her name was removed from the schedule. Her apron remained unclaimed, abandoned, as if that iteration of her no longer had a place. Since then, she has submitted applications everywhere. Gas stations, convenience stores, and an uptown bakery where she claimed to be too apprehensive for the customer-facing position. She also interviewed at a self-storage facility where the manager inquired, "Can you smile with less anxiety?" Confidence seemed as if it could be adjusted like a dial. No one returned the phone. The power bill had surged the previous month due to a malfunctioning radiator, prompting her to operate a space heater for a week to prevent the cold from permeating her bones. That morning, the utility company contacted again. "Miss Langdon, this is your 3rd and final notification. If the outstanding balance is not settled within 72 hours, we will initiate service termination." "I comprehend," Claire responded. She consistently did. That evening, rather than illumination, she ignited the remnants of a candle. Instead of a meal, she heated water for non-existent pasta, then extinguished the hob and observed the steam ascend like a diminutive specter. As she routinely did when the weight of the world became suffocating, she retrieved her journal. It was the sole remnant from her childhood. The leather cover was supple and frayed at the edges, the pages distorted from excessive ink and numerous teardrops. Within were her former aspirations, blueprint for the bakery she had once drafted in the margins of her textbooks, inventories of ingredients she had never been able to purchase, and titles of imaginary pastries she vowed to create one day. Presently, it predominantly contained silence. Claire commenced a new page, inscribing the date in delicate cursive, November 3rd. She wrote, "Today I purchased coffee for a stranger. I nearly refrained. I cannot ascertain the reason for my action. Perhaps it was the reflection of something in his eyes that resonated with my own, as if the world were excessively cacophonous and burdensome. He expressed his gratitude, saying thank you, as if it held significance. I believe that sufficed. Perhaps that will be the sole commendable action I undertake this week. Perhaps that is acceptable." She gazed at the words. They appeared diminutive, delicate, yet they were tangible, and at times, reality was all she possessed. Claire meticulously closed the journal and concealed it beneath her pillow, as she had done every night since she was 12. Thus, if the night became overwhelming, she would recall her true identity beneath the inadequacies. She nestled under the flimsy blanket, drawing it to her chin. Outside, the rain had diminished to a murmur. Inside, illuminated by the flickering candlelight, a girl devoid of employment, warmth, and a definitive future had nonetheless opted to offer her generosity. In a world perpetually yearning for more, perhaps that was all there was. Claire did not anticipate encountering him again. Yet, there he stood, clad in the same coat, albeit less drenched this time. His weary eyes remained unchanged, yet now they possessed a sharper, more concentrated gaze. He lingered at the periphery of the cafe, observing her, not with the discomfort of an unfamiliar face, but with the gravity of someone burdened by a memory too significant to erase. Claire returned that morning, not for coffee, as she had exhausted her funds, but to examine the community bulletin board adjacent to the restroom. Occasionally, there were advertisements for part-time employment, dog walking, house cleaning, babysitting, or similar opportunities. While she was perusing the board, she heard a voice behind her inquiring if she was still searching for something. She turned abruptly. It was he, the man for whom she had purchased coffee, now attired more neatly, although his boots remained scuffed. He smiled almost bashfully. "You again," Claire remarked warily. "Still lacking a wallet." He chuckled, a soft, agreeable sound. "No, fully prepared today." Claire narrowed her brows, contemplating a reciprocal gesture. "I did not undertake this for a favor." "I am aware," he remarked gently. "That is the reason it held significance. It was a hiatus." Claire scrutinized him with greater intensity now. He appeared to be an outsider in this neighborhood. His oration was excessively cautious, and his demeanor overly composed. "Who are you?" she inquired. He proffered his hand. "Tom," he stated. "I am a freelance writer and independent journalist. I compose authentic narratives about humanity." Claire refrained from shaking his hand. She reiterated, expressing skepticism, "A writer." He expressed a need for a narrative. "I believe you may possess one." Claire folded her arms. "What is the reason for my existence as a narrative?" "Due to your expenditure on another's coffee, despite your own financial constraints. Due to your lack of anticipation for gratitude. Was it due to your unawareness of being observed?" "However, I was." She remained silent. Tom James persisted. "I do not intend to cause you discomfort. I would appreciate the opportunity to learn more about you, should you be inclined to share." Claire paused. There was an unsettling quality about him, yet simultaneously, he did not evoke a sense of wrongdoing. "Understood," she stated. "You may inquire." They positioned themselves at the window, with sunlight penetrating the stained glass and casting pale streaks. James extracted a notebook, not the costly leather-bound variety, only a basic one with frayed ends. He did not immediately begin inquiring. He inquired about her name. She provided it. He inquired about the bakery sketch he had observed concealed within her notebook when she had momentarily opened it to make a note. Claire fluttered her eyelids. "Did you observe that?" "I observed particulars. Workplace risk." She informed him about the bakery, regarding the almond croissants her grandmother prepared each Saturday, concerning the aspiration she harbored since high school to establish a venue named Sugar and Light, regarding the accumulation of every gratuity she received, and the observation of her finances gradually diminishing, as ambitions proved more costly than rent ever was. James refrained from interrupting. He merely listened. His pen moved sporadically, yet predominantly. He regarded her not merely as a voice, but as an individual of significance and value. Upon their separation that day, he remarked, "Perhaps we shall converse again if you desire." Claire merely shrugged. "Certainly, there is no expense in conversing." However, as he exited the cafe, an emotion stirred within her. He had returned and regarded her as though she were significant. She was unaware that his true identity was James Rowan, that he had authored 7 best-selling novels, that his photograph had previously adorned the cover of a New Yorker, and that he had withdrawn from the public sphere 2 years prior after declaring he would cease writing unless he discovered a narrative worthy of the silence he had experienced. She was unaware that she was the narrative. Not at this time. During the subsequent fortnight, Claire and Tom established a subdued, nearly inadvertent cadence. They did not schedule their meetings. Occasionally, they encountered each other at the cafe, at other times at the small park nearby, where pigeons flitted about children's feet and the breeze wafted the aroma of street pretzels and decaying leaves. It was consistently informal and effortless, yet it started to resemble a recurring motif in her daily life, an existence she had unknowingly begun to seek until it had already manifested. Claire would converse, while James, still referred to as Tom by her, would listen. Not merely the courteous form of listening extended out of obligation, but the profound attentiveness that imparted significance to her words. He inscribed in a tattered notebook with a pencil that appeared perpetually depleted of lead, his head inclined slightly, brows knitted in focus. For perhaps the first time in her existence, Claire felt that her narrative held significance. She disclosed to him matters she had never vocalized. She reminisced about baking cupcakes with her grandma every Sunday morning, flowers scattered everywhere, her small hands barely capable of grasping the whisk. She had formerly held a genuine belief that she would possess her own cafe by this time. She acknowledged the numerous nights dedicated to sketching logos, drafting menus, and arranging inviting areas adorned with mismatched seats and cinnamon-scented windows. However, she also conveyed to him the additional details of the gradual disintegration of that aspiration. It unraveled not through a singular tempest, but through the gradual degradation of employment denials, utility expenses, and pervasive solitude, each disappointment accumulating until she possessed just a journal beneath her pillow and a heart that continued to harbor hope, however tenuously. Had no justification for doing so. I'm uncertain why I continue to believe in the inherent goodness of people, she remarked, gliding her finger along the texture of the park bench. He smiled at her, not out of pity, but with admiration, because you embody that goodness. Their shared moments evolved into a unique sanctuary. At times, they exchanged few words, strolling for blocks in silence, allowing the quiet to convey what language could not. Occasionally, she presented him with muffins, tenuously assembled from borrowed ingredients and optimism. He would take a bite, close his eyes, and hum as if savoring a reminiscence. This elicited laughter from her each time. She felt authentic once more, transcending the role of a mere problem to resolve, surpassing the status of a statistic with an overdue notice, embodying someone whose existence was not a liability, but a blessing, until the day it all unraveled. The incident commenced innocuously, as is typical with most betrayals. Claire had entered the second-hand bookshop on 9th Avenue, seeking refuge from the drizzle and the constriction in her chest. She cherished the establishment, with its uneven aisles and chairs that sagged excessively. She had no intention of making a purchase. She merely appreciated the aroma of aged paper and the tranquility. While perusing the new releases shelf more out of routine than expectation, she encountered it. A familiar visage, dark eyes, and an identical, subdued smile. She became immobilized. Her heart raced. Her hands grew frigid. The reverse of the dust jacket stated, James Rowan, a name she had not encountered in years, yet one still esteemed in literary circles. A best-selling author and reclusive prodigy, he had disappeared from public view following his 7th novel, famously asserting he had exhausted his creative expression. Claire gazed at the photograph, requiring no second glance. It was him, not Tom. James, from whom she had departed the bookshop in a daze. Upon returning to her apartment, she rifled through the hastily written notes he had inscribed on their shared coffee shop napkins and loose sheets. Fragments of her existence confronted her in ink, expressions she believed had been exchanged solely between them, sentiments she had not articulated to anyone else. All were present, verbatim. The following morning, she discovered him at their customary bench in the park, a notebook resting on his lap. He glanced up, anticipating a smile. She refrained from sitting. Your name is not Tom, she stated, each word devoid of warmth. James blinked. Claire, James Rowan, she interjected. Author, recluse, deceiver. He rose gradually. Please, you have been chronicling my life, she retorted. You appropriated my existence, my narrative, and transformed it into one of your sentimental fables, did you not? It is not as such, he replied, his voice taut. I did not intend. Are you composing a book? She insisted. He faltered, then acquiesced. Just once. Her voice trembled. I am merely another fractured girl within your creation. Yet another sob story designed to evoke a sense of nobility in readers for a little duration? No, he said, advancing. You are the impetus for my resurgence in writing. Your courage inspired me. You contributed selflessly despite your own dearth. You rekindled my belief. She retreated, her gaze aflame. I hated a man, she replied with bitterness. Not a millionaire, nor a renowned author, merely a man who appeared cold and adrift. James swallowed with difficulty. I was that man. No, she murmured. You were an experiment, and I was unaware of my evaluation. He extended his hand. Claire, I transformed it into hope, yet she was already departing. The rain commenced to fall slowly and steadily, saturating her sleeves. She tightened her coat, attempting to maintain her composure. The betrayal pained her, not due to his notoriety, but because he had acknowledged her and subsequently exploited her. James remained still, allowing the rain to permeate his pages, observing the woman who had rescued him depart, this time due to his actions. The envelope was unadorned, lacking a name on the front, merely inscribed with Claire in meticulous, slanted script. It was concealed beneath the welcome mat at her apartment door, only partially visible, as if it wished to remain undiscovered unless she actively sought it. Claire noticed it upon her return, drenched from the persistent drizzle that had prevailed throughout the morning. Her fingers faltered before grasping it. She recognized the sender prior to opening it. She shut the door, settled into the small chair by the window, and unfolded the letter with quivering hands. It stated, "Claire, I told you stories were everything to me. This was untrue. For an extended period, I believed the world did not require another narrative. Not after all I had composed. Not after my words began to resonate as hollow to my own perception. However, upon encountering you, I perceived an instance of benevolence from an unfamiliar individual. Unbeknownst to me, I had inadvertently discovered the tale I never anticipated to encounter once more. I did not need to write to believe. I never aimed to portray you as a character. You were never merely that. You became integral to my narrative. I intended to reveal this to you, which is why I left the manuscript. It has not been viewed by any publishing house, editor, or press, only by you. If you choose never to communicate with me again, I will comprehend. However, I felt it necessary for you to be aware. You transformed me. I can only hope that I reciprocated in some manner." James. Claire held the pages in her lap for an extended period. Her breath was momentarily stifled. He had enclosed the manuscript. She regarded it with a blend of apprehension and intrigue. The title was inscribed in handwriting on the initial page. The girl with no reason left but still chose to give. She turned to the initial chapter, which commenced with a cafe and a modest act of benevolence. A girl who relinquished her final $5 not out of surplus, but because another was devoid of any. Each page encapsulated her narrative, not through mere facts and bullet points, but through emotion. It portrayed her perspective of the world when unobserved, the subtle resilience she bore as if it were a second skin. Her laughter, her tears, her aspirations for a bakery infused with the aroma of cinnamon and renewed opportunities were not lamentable. They were imbued with reverence. James depicted her as one might portray the moon, not alone for its luminescence, but for its ability to shine even in solitude. Claire flipped to a page approximately midway through, where James recounted observing her assist a child in fastening their shoelaces outside the park. She spoke softly, as if the world had acknowledged her, yet she still yearned for its kindness. I was unaware of my quest until I witnessed that moment, something that would remain unchronicled. It was then that I realized my desire to write about her. Claire wiped her face, acknowledging that she had been weeping silently. However, this was not the type of weeping she had experienced in recent months, devoid of frustration, loneliness, or hunger. It was something different, something more uplifting. Someone had perceived her not for her deficiencies or struggles, but for her generous offerings without expectation of reciprocity. She gradually closed the manuscript, her hands lingering on the cover. A knock resonated at the door, causing her to freeze. Subsequently, she rose, approached, and opened it, only to find no one present. The air was imbued with a subtle scent of rain, and distant footsteps gradually dissipated into the silence. Claire gazed at the sky and, for the first time in what seemed like years, smiled. Claire had traversed 4 blocks beyond her intended turn on 2 occasions. Her fingers gripped the manuscript, now worn at the edges from repeated readings. Rain gently pattered against her jacket sleeve, while the wind ushered in the nascent chill of winter. She was uncertain about the impetus for her departure. Perhaps it was his manner of writing about her. Perhaps it was the oppressive silence in her apartment, now amplified by the reality of being acknowledged. Or perhaps it was simply this. She had devoted her life to individuals who never recalled her name. James had retained every detail. She arrived at the address inscribed faintly on the reverse of the envelope. The townhouse was situated on a narrow tree-lined street, exuding tranquilly. Ivy entwined the iron gate, and a warm light emanated from within the windows. She paused momentarily, uncertain, before advancing to ring the bell. There was no response, yet the door was ajar. After a moment of hesitation, she pushed it open, and the scent enveloped her immediately. Cinnamon, nutmeg, and a subtle hint of brown sugar, dissolving in butter. She entered a humble kitchen adorned with shelves of antiquated cookbooks and 2 chipped mugs on the table. At the stove stood James, no longer the enigmatic stranger or the secretive author, clad in a flower-patterned apron and gazing at the oven timer as if it were capable of judgment. He turned, observed her, and offered a faint smile, not indicative of relief or triumph, but rather something gentler, akin to forgiveness. "You're here," he remarked. She remained silent. He motioned towards the counter. "I attempted your grandmother's pecan bread recipe. You once mentioned that she quantified love by the pinch, not the cup." Claire arched an eyebrow, advancing closer. "Did you recall?" "I recalled everything," James stated. They were seated at the kitchen table, 2 warm slices on disparate plates. The silence between them had transformed from tense to comfortable, akin to a quilt draped over something ancient and sore. They consumed their meal leisurely. He glanced up. "No more deceit," James asserted. "You have imparted sufficient truth." Claire met his gaze. "I did not intend to be your narrative's intoxication," she stated. "You were not," he responded. "You were the impetus for my renewed storytelling." She did not grin, although she maintained eye contact. Following an extended silence, she retrieved a manuscript from her coat and set it on the table. "I wish to assist in its completion." He blinked. "Do you?" "It is not solely about me," she stated. "Numerous individuals share my experience. Women who offer their final $5. Men who maintain open doors in inclement weather. Children who divide their lunch equally. We compose their narratives," James reclined. "Common individuals with remarkable compassion," he stated. Claire acquiesced. "We remind the world of their existence." Thus, the girl who previously possessed nothing. The man who once possessed everything yet felt void resolved to create something that neither could accomplish individually. Not from guilt, not from a desire to rescue, but from respect, emerging from a state perilously akin to love. That night, they clinked mugs not in celebration of endings or beginnings, but in acknowledgement of the tranquil, gradual middle, where 2 lives start to intertwine. No more falsehoods, only veracity and coherent expression. The book was released on the inaugural Tuesday of spring. It arrived unobtrusively, lacking a celebrity launch event, special critiques from literary authorities, and instead made a subdued entrance in independent bookshops, library collections, and local cafes where warmth accompanied a hot beverage. The title was unassuming, characterized by friendliness, and even impoverished. Below the title, in similarly unadorned print, the names Claire Langdon and James Rowan elicited startled eyes. A renowned novelist reemerged after years of obscurity alongside an unknown girl. The intrigue generated sales, while the narrative within is what retained readers. The book encompassed more than merely Claire. It transcended mere kindness. It pertained to the decision to exhibit compassion when circumstances provided ample justification for indifference. The initial chapter recounted a gloomy morning, a $5 bill, and a girl who relinquished what she could ill afford to part with. However, when readers progressed through the pages, they saw it was not merely a singular deed. The book contained narratives of actual individuals. Claire's neighbors, acquaintances, passers-by she had previously encountered, others who contributed discreetly. It encompassed James's contemplations over seeing Claire from a distance in a coffee shop, convinced he was analyzing her, only to realize he was acquiring knowledge from her. He described her kindness with the awe of a poet and the humility of one who had nearly forgotten the essence of grace. The book ascended the bestseller list swiftly, not due to its ostentation or ingenuity, but because it resonated with authenticity. Book clubs circulated it with dog-eared pages. Educators recite passages aloud in classes. Anonymous individuals affixed messages within the books they contributed to libraries. This moved me to tears in a profoundly positive manner. You evoked memories of my grandmother. I purchased a coffee for another individual today as a result of this. Claire, unexpectedly observed by millions, was astonished. She had not anticipated any of it. Renown induced anxiety in her. The crowds exhausted her. However, with each subsequent speaking engagement at libraries, schools, and shelters, her voice trembled less. I did not compose this book for the purpose of gaining recognition, she stated in an early interview. I composed it to emphasize that kindness is never squandered, particularly in times of financial hardship. With her portion of the earnings, Claire leased a slender corner edifice adorned with a weathered blue awning and flaking paint. She designated it Sugar and Light, a title she had inscribed in the margins of her journal years prior. The space functioned as both a bakery and a bookshop. The front window fogged each morning with the aroma of freshly baked bread, cinnamon, and delicious coffee. Within, children recite from worn picture books. Adolescents occupied corner tables, enjoying complimentary cookies and paperbacks from the Take One, Keep One shelf. All individuals were accommodated, neither due to a lack of financial resources nor a deficiency of optimism. James sat in the corner practically daily, not as an author, nor as one deserving attention, but simply as a man who enjoyed observing narratives develop over warm scones and sugar-coated hands. He had discovered a residence, not in a mansion, nor on a stage, but behind a window, near the counter where Claire removed flour from her cheek and smiled at each person who entered as if they were the reason she had opened the door that day. To the majority of patrons, he was Mr. M.O. James, a reserved elderly gentleman with an always half-filled notebook, who leisurely sipped his coffee and was acquainted with the names of every child who read alongside him. At times, an individual identified him. "Are you not James Rowan, the author?" He would nod and subsequently gesture towards the woman behind the counter. The narrative commenced with her. Claire continued to write, but no longer from a position of desperation. She composed during the interlude between muffin batches. She chronicled authentic individuals, commonplace yet remarkable in their unrecognized deeds. She and James commenced organizing complimentary storytelling evenings bi-weekly on Fridays. Individuals recounted narratives, some chaotic, some amusing, some poignant. All of them are authentic. During one of these evenings, a child remarked, "My mother covered someone's groceries last week." She stated it enlarged her heart. Claire smiled. That was her sole aspiration. In a spectacle-obsessed world, they had created something subtly exquisite. In the corner, under a sign that stated, "Free coffee, no questions," James surveyed the ambient lighting, the shelves of narratives, and the woman who once bestowed upon him $5 without expectation of reciprocity. I consider this the finest chapter one have ever composed. Occasionally, the most profound narrative is not the one shared with the world, but rather the one you experience together each day. The chilly nightfall enveloped the city in silence. Snow descended gently, coating the pavement outside Sugar and Light. The bakery radiated warmth, characterized by the gentle hum of the oven, the aroma of cinnamon and butter, and the soft glimmer of candles adorning the counter. The establishment was closed for business. Chairs were stacked, lights muted, and Claire navigated silently into the kitchen, applying the finishing touches to the cake she had been preparing since noon. It was uncomplicated. Vanilla sponge cake, airy whipped cream, and a drizzle of caramel on the surface. However, the cake was not the focal point. It was intended for whoever it was meant. James arrived punctually, precisely as she anticipated. He entered through the rear entrance, removing snow from his coat, his eyebrows raised in astonishment at the subdued illumination and flickering candlelight. Claire stood before the cake, her apron sprinkled with flour, her hair secured in a loose bun. "Happy birthday," she uttered gently. James blinked his eyes. "Did you recall?" "I consistently remember those who remember me," she responded. He gazed at the cake, then returned his attention to her. "This is the first occasion in almost 2 decades that someone has baked for me," she remarked. "You have earned it." They were seated at the modest kitchen table, alone together. Absence of embellishments, absence of spectators, merely the aroma of warmth, the sound of subdued respiration, and an unspoken connection that had established itself long before each acknowledged it. James placed his fork down, following the initial mouthful. "Throughout my existence," he remarked, "I have chronicled love. I have molded it, attempted to articulate it, yet I believe I have only just begun to experience it." Claire gazed at him, her eyes glistening with a gentle certainty. "All I ever required," she stated, "was an individual who perceived me as sufficient. Not a concept, not a cause, merely me." James retrieved a small velvet pouch from his coat pocket, devoid of a box or ribbon. Within it lay a thin, worn ring, its pearl precariously attached to the setting. It was neither new nor shiny. "This belonged to my mother," he stated. "She instructed me to preserve it until I encountered someone who exhibited kindness and secrecy, who offered without the desire for recognition, but rather out of an innate compulsion to give." He gazed into Claire's eyes, his speech now subdued. She did not specify that it must be an affluent or remarkable someone, merely that it should be someone genuine. He extended the ring. "Claire, would you remain? Not alone in this location, but throughout this existence beside me." Claire gazed at him, then smiled. "I have been residing," she murmured. "I was unaware that it had a designation." She positioned the ring onto her finger. No embellishments, no extravagant accolades, but 2 hands, one truth, and a love that had developed gradually, akin to bread rising quietly. The bakery commenced operations, as per usual, the following morning. However, there was a discernible difference. Children dashed in the front entrance, laughing. The aroma of freshly baked scones permeated the air, while James occupied his customary position by the window. Claire positioned herself behind the counter, organizing a plate of muffins, when a young girl inquired, "Miss Claire, what does that sign signify?" She gestured towards the hand-painted wooden board that James had affixed above the door the previous evening, where compassion was initially cultivated. Claire gazed upward, her eyes softened. "It signifies," she stated, "this location was established upon an inexhaustible foundation." Outside, snowflakes twirled in the illumination. Claire and James stood on the bakery steps, her hand entwined with his, steam rising from paper cups in their other hands. Absence of television teams and headlines. Merely the joy of children racing by, the warmth of a home constructed from narratives and sweetness, and the subtle miracle of 2 lives united, not by chance, but by conviction. There were no further examinations, no additional facades. A love unrequested, yet willingly reciprocated. The most profound love often stems not from possessions, but from the willingness to relinquish them. Occasionally, love is not presented in opulence or adorned with extravagant displays. Occasionally, it manifests as a minor act of kindness, a comforting cup of coffee, an heirloom ring, or the decision to remain. Claire and James did not encounter one another by destiny or mythical narratives. They discovered one another in an instance of serene benevolence, a moment that evolved into trust, subsequently into a home, and ultimately became an undeniable reality. If this narrative resonated with you and highlighted the profound impact of even the little acts of kindness, we encourage you to remain with us a while longer. Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for additional narratives of compassion, redemption, and love that commence where judgment concludes. Occasionally, the most compelling narratives are those that convey their message subtly rather than overtly. I look forward to our next narrative.